In this video, we'll be discussing arithMATIC, and arithMATIC is a part of the dTective forensic video analysis suite of tools from Ocean Systems, which allows you to perform mathematical operations on 2 tracks of video, although the plugin can also be used on a single track of video. And arithMATIC can perform math on the corresponding pixel values from tracks 1 and 2. So when we get into showing the effect editor, you'll see that each mode describes the kind of math that's being performed. arithMATIC can be especially useful in cases where you need to determine what has changed from frame to frame. So we have this clip here, which has pretty obvious change from start to finish. So let's talk about how this all works. And we'll start with the subtraction mode. The first thing you'll want to do is isolate an area or a portion in the video where it's after the change has taken place. So right around here. So we'll start with that, mark an endpoint, and mark an out somewhere down here. And we're going to want to create a new sequence, and there's a couple ways to do that. The first way, I could just drag this down to my timeline. Just drag from the Composer window down to the timeline, and that will by default create a new sequence. And it's going to ask, where do you want to put this sequence? And I can choose the arithMATIC bin. But I will delete that sequence so I can show you another way to do it. Let's just delete that. Because you can also use one of these modes here. So splice in or overwrite. Since there's nothing in the timeline, I can choose either one. Just click that, and the same thing happens. Where do you want to put this sequence? arithMATIC bin, click OK, and there's our new sequence. So either way works. And let me rename this sequence. We'll call it demo. And we're going to want to put another track of video on the timeline, and there's a couple ways to do that. One is to right-click down here and choose new video track, or go to timeline, choose new, and select video track. So we'll do that, and there's our new video track. So now what we want to do is select the area of the video before the change took place, so back to the beginning. So we'll mark an endpoint at the beginning and mark an out point just before it changed, right around there, mark an out point, and that's going to need to be on V2. So the way you do that, you can either drag and drop like so, or make sure your position indicator is at the beginning by pressing home on the keyboard with the timeline selected, and then you can overwrite. And you're going to want to target V2 to do this. So click on V1, target V2, and then overwrite, just like that. So either way works there, that's fine. And it's okay that it's a shorter clip than what's on V1. And press home on the keyboard again to go back to the beginning. And now we can apply the arithMATIC effect. So go to Tools, go to Effect Palette, find the dTective category, and find the arithMATIC plugin within. And go ahead and you can drag and drop to V2 like so, or let me undo that. If you go into what's called segment mode, click on this, highlight the clip that you want to apply the effect to, and then double click the effect. It does the same thing. Let me get out of segment mode because we don't need to be in it anymore. Close the effect palette and go to the effect editor. So a couple ways to get to the effect editor. One is to go to Tools, Effect Editor, or click on the effect mode button right here. Either way is fine. And now we're in the effect editor. And the default mode is subtraction, which you can see here. And already you can see that it's sort of highlighted some areas of change between video track 1 and video track 2. But let's talk about the settings, because you can drag what's called the scale slider, and there's also a blend slider. So the scale slider, if I go to the right, you'll notice that those areas of change start to really glow pretty effectively. And then blend, I can blend video track 1 and video track 2, so you can really see what's changed. Now these sliders, this is kind of interesting, you can actually highlight your slider and then use your number pad on your keyboard to type in a number if you want. So if you wanted the scale slider to read 1, just hit 1 and make sure you push enter on the keyboard, and now 1 is the scale slider setting. You can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move incrementally between whole numbers. So if I wanted to go lower than 1, but not exactly 0, I can go backwards by going left. So you can see it's going from 0, and then the right arrow takes me back to 1. Then 1 will eventually get to 2, and you'll see that I can incrementally adjust the brightness values by using the left and right arrow keys on my keyboard. Alright, and that's true with the blend slider as well. You can click on the blend slider, type in something like 50, push enter, and there you go. You can also highlight that slider. You can use the arrow keys here as well. And if you hold shift, you can go back, hold numbers, and if you hold shift and hold the arrow keys down, it goes faster. So kind of a fun way to see your adjustments. Just holding the shift key and the arrow keys down just to see those adjustments. Alright, so subtraction, what's happening here with subtraction is it's subtracting the pixel values from the second track of video and the corresponding pixel values in the first track of video. Now if we were to choose a different mode, let's choose addition. It's doing the same thing, only now it's adding the corresponding pixel values from the 2 tracks of video. And the same thing here, we can choose the blend slider and the scale slider. And it is a lot easier, I think, to use the arrow keys here to really get your adjustments fine-tuned. Use the blend slider to really see the difference between those 2 tracks of video. And those differences start to become pretty obvious between those 2 tracks. And then you have the multiplication mode. Multiplication is multiplying the corresponding pixel values between the 2 tracks of video. And again, the scale slider will help you out to really see the differences, as well as the blend slider. And the same thing here, you can use the arrow keys to go incrementally to really see your differences. Hold the shift key down if you want. And the same thing with the blend slider, just to see the differences. Okay, and the last mode is division. Now division works sort of in the inverse way that these other modes work. So we're going to have to create a new sequence, because in this case with division, you're going to want to have V2 be before the change and V1 be after the change. So it's the inverse of what we just did. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create a new sequence. Let's close the effect editor and right click, new sequence. I'll call this division. And as it turns out, I have ins and outs already set from before. So that's going to be our V1 track. So let's just drag this down to our new sequence. And now we're going to go to after the change occurs, mark an in point, mark an out point. Let's go to timeline, do a new video track, and then go ahead and hit home on the keyboard, target V2, and we'll splice this into V2. And now we can apply arithMATIC to V2. Let's go to the effect palette, drag this down to V2, open the effect editor. Let's bring this back to the beginning by clicking home, open the effect editor, and this time we'll choose division. And you can see with division that you're getting a sort of inverse looking image, and the areas of change are really highlighted pretty obviously here. So division, again, these modes are self-explanatory. It's dividing the pixel values from the second track of video by the corresponding pixel values from the first track of video. And this one, the scale slider, once you get to a certain point, it kind of just turns everything white. So you're going to work with this one and really the between 1 and 2, and the arrow keys become very important with the division mode. So if I can go incrementally, you can really start to see, between 0 and 1 some changes happening there. And then blend, of course, is the blend between V1 and V2. Now also with division, you get to play with the equalize button. So if I'm anywhere between 0 and 1, what equalize will do is try to eliminate some of this noise. So if I click equalize, it's trying to eliminate some of the noise in the image. Because what's happening is it's dividing the corresponding pixel values, and anything that's the same, the division mode just turns white, and there's some noise introduced. So equalize attempts to reduce some of that noise. And then if I take the scale slider up a little bit, And you can kind of see the difference there. Now when I get beyond 1, start getting more towards 2, this equalize button doesn't do anything anymore. So it really needs to be between 0 and 1 for that equalize to do anything. You can see there. Alright, so those are all the modes, and that's how you work with arithMATIC in Avid Media Composer. We can also look at how to use it on one track of video. So let's create a new sequence. Let's call this Demo 2. And let's just look at this mark an endpoint here and mark an out point here. Drop this down. Hit home. And we'll apply arithMATIC to one track of video. Open the effect editor. Because you can use it just as, you know, an adjustment tool. And if I use a scale slider, you can start to adjust brightness levels. The blend mode will adjust some of those brightness values as well. And you can play with the different modes just to see what that gets you. You know, if you're trying to work with a piece of footage and try to work with some of the brightness values, this might come in handy for you. And all the modes work pretty well except for division. Division just turns white. But all the other modes can be used for, you know, some form of analysis if you're trying to brighten your overall image. And that is how arithMATIC works in Avid Media Composer.